Before we get started, I just got a new toy on Friday. I got one of those Motorola satellite messengers.
Oh,
Cheap insurance if you're lost somewhere in the boonies to text someone. It also has a big fat orange SOS button and all that type of stuff.
you realize, Roland, you could also not have to use that by not getting lost in the boonies. See, some of us choose to stay within the bounds of the city.
JM, that defeats the purpose. The purpose is to get lost in the boonies.
The purpose is to get lost.
The purpose is to get found, but to get found, you have to be lost first.
Yeah.
There's beauty in being found. I like it.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast. In this show, we talk about our experiences and lessons learned in enterprise architecture and business process management. What's Your Baseline is designed to be for everyone. Newbies who are just getting started with these topics, organizations who want to improve their EA and BPM groups and the value they get from it, as well as practitioners who want to get a different perspective and care about the discipline.
Each episode will tackle different key topics, providing context, background, best practices, and stories from the road, inviting you to learn from our challenges and successes, and demonstrating key tools to help you set up your practice and get the most out of it.
I'm your host, Roland Wolt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson. Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. I got to tell you, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit sore today. Now, I got a story for you. Why am I a little sore today? Body's a little achy. Because yesterday, for the first time in my life, I ran a 5K.
Ooh.
I know, it sounds crazy. I've been sitting behind this desk for years and years and years. Why did I run a 5K? Well, it was Terry Fox Run, which is a marathon in Canada to support cancer research. And I spent the last 6 months preparing myself to run 5 kilometers. And I got to say, it was easier than I thought it would be. I assumed I would be literally dead today. Instead, I am just a little achy. But I guess 6 months of training, and I think your wonderful wife giving me great tips on how to learn how to actually run was a big part of it. So I'm celebrating and aching a little bit. How are you doing, my friend?
You ran it in 18 minutes, JM? Was that the objective?
No, not in 18 minutes, but more on the side of like 35,
more like
40
80?
minutes. But I mean, well, listen, I'm a beginner runner. What do I know? I'm just like putting one foot in front of the other and hoping not to fall over as I run. No, it was okay. I could have gone faster, and I probably could have gone further. But for a first foray, it was just right.
No, that's good. I honestly think it's really good, JM. I was just wondering because I read an article of one of our dear competition a couple of weeks ago that said, oh yeah, if you do this thing 5 times, in this case it was process mining, but I will happily apply this to 5K runs. If you do this thing more than 5 times, you need to establish a center of excellence. So now we have to talk about, JM, how we establish your running center of excellence and see where it goes. How about that idea?
Ooh, that's a good idea. Honestly, I could have used some folks around me all the time who were easy to contact, who knew what they were doing, who established standards, who were part of a community, who were creating good Wait a second. Isn't that the topic of today's episode? And I got to tell you,
What?
we have a really special guest on. Yes.
Do we?
So we'd like to introduce our
who do we have
guest.
on the
Yeah,
show?
we do. We have our good friend T. Now, if you haven't seen Tea with T, you are missing out. But we have him on this show today to talk a little bit more about one of the things he loves and something that we would love to share with our audience, all about centers of excellence. So welcome to the show, T.
Thanks for having me, guys. Hi, Jam. Hi, Roland.
Hey T, how you doing? And can you talk a little bit about your background? Because at least I thought it was a good idea to invite you to this show, and I think you have some value-add contributions to this topic.
Very well. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so my name is Thi. Probably by now, by my accent, you can tell I'm actually a German. My name is Vietnamese. So I was born and raised in Germany, studied actually in the States, and I studied business administration, and right after university, I started to work for Siemens AG. And then from there on, I worked for the next 19 years in 6 different countries in different functions, really within IT. did quite a few of ERP implementations, worked my way up the ranks to being a CIO of a Siemens entity in Vietnam, switched to the dark side, went to finance, uh, did also quite a lot of different things there. And yeah, my career then brought me back to Vietnam in 2020, where I joined healthcare and was in the service business. But I guess today you also are going to be interested about my years as a head of operation excellence, where I was implementing and leading different kinds of centers of excellences in the business process management, process mining realm.
Of course, and then when you mentioned you went to the dark side of finance, I heard you're working for an employer. I think the abbreviation is Satan's accounting package. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a lot of different abbreviations in multiple languages for that. But the way I see it is, like all this humor is also a part of envy. So that's absolutely great, and I have no problems with that.
Oh, yeah, no, make no bones about it. If our company had the revenue that SAP had, I'm pretty sure we all would be super happy. So,
Oh yeah. So this is an exciting. So we're having you on to talk about one part of what you do, but I can only assume that all these experiences come together to form your perspective. I mean, you make the recurring YouTube and video segments, the Tea with Tea is with Tea with Tea, and how is that content creation help to synthesize a lot of your perspectives into a message you take forward? Like what does it combine to create those videos for you?
That's a very good question. To be honest, I haven't really thought so deeply about it at all the times. I do love creating and sharing content, and what really drives me
Mhm.
is that people could draw upon that experience without having to take all the, let's call it, bad experience. And so I want the listener and the audience to have, let's say, learning nuggets without having to go through all of these things. And I try to always wrap it in a,
Mhm.
let's say, humorous way, witty way. And I do love actually the one saying of Uncle Iroh, like good times make great memories, and bad times make great lessons, right? So I hope that
Ah.
with all of the different kind of exposure I had in this corporate world, that I could contribute to some of the listeners. And and don't take me literally, have some fun with it. And there's usually a little bit of a deeper hidden message as well.
it is, and I really like the format. You got those 2, 3, 4 minute nuggets. Um, Even though I still want to see you dance on a pole, but that's a different story. Um, I really love it. It's like when I open my LinkedIn feed or I see you popping up in my YouTube subscriptions, and I see that and I said, oh, that's nice. I take 2, 3 minutes back and just watch you, and I found it very interesting. But before we get to the real topic of the show today, which is talking about centers of excellence, in case you haven't noticed it, uh, let's just give people a little bit of a background for you about you as a person. So, what are your hobbies? What are your interests? What are your bucket list items?
Well, I mean, it's just a podcast. It's not going to be a couple hours, I guess. But some of my hobbies, to generalize it, is I just really love to learn, and I really do not mind to be the stupidest person in the room, as long as I don't leave it the same person. And so, yeah, I do love music. I played violin and piano for many many years. I'm a little bit of a nerd and a geek. Yeah, so whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, all of these great things. Yeah, I play tennis, and I enjoy spending the time with my family. I'm married, have a 13-year-old daughter, and yeah, so this is a little bit more about tea.
Hey, well, it's good to get to know you. I think our audience really likes to know the human beings behind some of the decision making or sort of guidance and strategy for the market. I mean, here's the truth. Everyone who ever made any company or who helps shape and direct any company is just a person. And behind them are their experiences, their biases, their loves, their hates, the individual that they are that shapes those decisions. And so helping to understand the best practices you bring from the perspective of who you are gives us a full picture. And I think that's great. But today we're going to be talking a lot about those best practices because I got to tell you, I talk to clients all the time when we talk about process and enterprise architecture who don't see the need necessarily to establish centers of excellence as part of their initial sort of deployment of that practice of process. They say, we're just going to equip our experts and we're going to send them out into the world. I think I've heard those words a lot. We're gonna send them out into the world and we're going to have them create amazing things for people all over the business. And my concern that comes back to them is who's managing this? Like, you've created this special team that is going to be creating stuff, or you've created a lot of knowledge, you've tried to install it, but nothing's really being retained. You're developing individuals, but you're not developing the organization. You're not developing a structure around it, and you're not encapsulating that in some sort of repeatability. This feels like a loss from the very get-go. And so centers of excellence have been always a big part of how I see deployments going. And I'd love to hear more about where you see center of excellence as a purpose. So our first part is always the why. Why do you think center of excellence are so important for organizations to establish? And what role do you see them playing in an organization's development of intellectual capital?
If you ask 10 people what's the meaning of a center of excellence to them on a personal level, I think at least you will get probably 15 different answers.
Yeah.
So if I talked about the person working in accounting and controlling, even there it is also very different depending on the environment. It depends on the industry. It depends on whether this is, let's say, internal accounting and reporting, or is it, customer facing. There's different layers and levels of that. So with the topic of center of excellence, it even becomes more diverse. So irregardless of what is the specific meaning to, let's say, any one person or organization, which is of course also formed by the culture of organization itself, definitely there must be a purpose. But here already, I even branched out into two different things, and don't worry, we can always come back to these things. But even when we talk about the purpose, the question is, wow, T, you're great. You got a purpose. Yeah, but what if the purpose is a bad one? That's also possible. So do
Right.
we value the purpose itself or the outcomes? So maybe I have a bad purpose, I just want to see the world burn. Bad purpose. But maybe I create cool things. Yeah, it's possible. So let's make it a little bit more concrete, where I share a little bit about the context on where I've created a center of excellence. But I think it's also important to understand that at that time, I did not have that knowledge to tell the story I do have now. So we also have to put ourselves into the shoes of T when he started the journey of creating different center of excellence. I think this is really, really important when you talk about decision making, because now in
Sure.
hindsight, you're always smarter, right? So in 2016, I was nominated to be basically Mr. Order to Cash for Siemens Digital Industries. And so we're talking about a $16 billion business, right? And so, yeah, we are in 30 lead countries, 90 countries all over the world. And it's pretty simple to talk about different activities. But you can imagine in a large corporation like Siemens, some countries, they have their own warehouses and manufacturing sites. Some were purely export, some were doing distribution business via partners. And so the complexity of that simple word order to cash is already very manifold. So the purpose in the beginning was to harmonize and standardize processes, because we wanted to become more agile on the market. But before we could even actually address that topic, we needed transparency. So then that became the new person. Like, when you play video games like Zelda, that's a side quest. Oh, suddenly the main quest changed. Now it's a side quest. Suddenly it's transparency. And then, of course, had to be fast, shouldn't cost much. And then next question is like, but who are those people who actually should be the center of excellence? And everything at that time, everything was agile. So you can imagine, right? What kind of pressure is it that you're thrown at so many demands? You're moving around, you don't even know the needle of a compass. It has not even been adjusted. But the only thing which stuck was center of excellence. And that term, I tell you, was burned already before we even started. Why? Because people would always think center of excellence is exactly the same as the worst center of excellence they actually ever knew. So as a starter, we took it with humor. We always said, we are the new center of excellence, but not that one.
Ah, so you want to take away the negative association of the words
Yeah,
and give yourselves a new chance to make a difference. I like it.
absolutely. And we always introduced this joke. There are three lies, right, in life. Number one, I love you. Number two, the check is in the mail. Number three, I'm from headquarters here to help. And we introduced the fourth lie about ourselves. It's a center of excellence. Three words, three lies. Should it be a center? Should it be of something or for something? And how do we know it's excellent? Who is it who actually says we are excellent? I mean, it sounds a little bit arrogant, right? I'm the center of excellence. I'm here to help. Yeah, sounds very much like the other three lies. So we had another mantra. What we said is, yes, I was globally responsible. I was in the headquarters, but I did a reset on the team. So with the exception of myself, who was, let's say, quotes unquote, a headquarters guy, my team consisted of only people from the regions who actually had done the work. So from the regions for the regions.
Hmm.
No headquarter political stuff, really young ladies who have been posting orders all their lives, talking to customers. They don't know nothing about the political environment working in a centralized department. Yeah, so that is the first part. So, yes, we would never say we are excellent, but we at least would be confident to know that we knew stuff. So we didn't talk about this some electronic orders. We would really say EDI, status 51, status 53. We would go to that level.
Which is very interesting because you established a how do I say that, a process oriented, even though that word is maybe a little bit wrong, a process focused COE around this order to cash process. What I typically see is COEs more in a different setup, as part of the governance structure. And when you think about the typical governance structure that countries have, you have the people making the rules, the people doing some stuff, and the people who being the justices on top of it if something goes aside. I see a COE more as a helping organization for the executive branch, right? And that typically, at least in my experience, is focused around a tool. Oh yeah, we brought this enterprise-wide tool in there to map our processes or to do process mining or whatever, right? And then you need a group that owns that tool, and then they put the little sticker on their door signs and say, oh yeah, we're the COE. But that's obviously quite different from what you did because you were focused on business results.
Yes and no. Actually, you're absolutely right as well. But I think here is the trick. It's not really a mutually exclusive binary either or discussion, but it's as well and on top. So yes, we had really marvelous stickers, I tell you. Yeah. So we had our tool. We're also implementing, one of these new technologies which came around, process mining. Siemens at that time was really the largest process mining consumer, so to speak, globally speaking in terms of terabytes and users and all of that. So yes, we had that as well. But I think going back a little bit, and I was of course a little bit cryptic, but let me be a little bit more specific now, is There's a difference between focusing or communicating on A while at the same time you want to have B. So while I did have the governance authority to implement and push and roll out tools, I didn't do that. So the first speak as a global process owner, that word only existed in the headquarters in Germany. Once I set my foot into the regions, I never said that I'm a global process owner. What I said was, I'm not here to implement a new initiative for continuous business process improvement. You're doing it every day already. I'm not questioning that because I know nobody wants to have a bad process. My job is to make your life still better because I need to implement a new how. You are going to put in the new what. And if I need to then bring onto the table a new what and a how, then that's my job. Yeah, and I think that that is really the difference on how I approach a topic. And by the way, my team as well, because they came from there, they knew hell. And just to share this story, you know why all of these stories around Hercules and Achilles and all this Greek mythology, you see somebody is always going to the underworld and fighting against a monster. There's a lot of mythology about going to the underworld. The stories after thousands of years are not so interesting that they went to the underworld, that they went to hell. What makes them so interesting is that they survived. So they came
Came back,
back
yeah.
to tell the story. And I think that is really the important part is my ladies and myself. We have been out there, we have been in hell, and we didn't want anyone else to deal with that. Whether it's master data, whether it's Incoterms or payment terms, because we would go onto that level of empathy because we were the stupid people back in the days to press the button 10,000 times because the process was bad. And we wanted to change that.
And I find it refreshing saying this because back in the day, I also led a COE at one point in time. And I thought my role would be not the poster child of that topic, hey, we got this. But it was more like being the servant for people. I did the cleanup work with my team. I did the cleanup work in the background to provide the people on the front actually doing or providing them the stuff that they need to do their job. Right. In this case, it was selling and whatnot. But anyway, so it's more a different attitude that you see. And I think that humble servant attitude is a pretty good one. And it seems you obviously took that on too. But speaking of which, when we look at COEs and forms of COEs, there's obviously different ways to skin a cat. What have you seen as the typical ways how organizations set up those COEs? Is it the monolith that is the center of the universe and everything circles around it, or is it a different form of organization that you've seen?
I mean, arithmetically and statistically speaking, I do see that, especially in the beginning of initiatives, that there seems to be a little bit of a monolithic approach, like a kind of a hub and spoke, everything goes into the center. And I think that's a really great approach because it's extremely effective. And I think it also should be a really great approach to take all the blame. I love to take all the blame because anybody knew I was just new to the job. So for me, it's absolutely okay to take all the blame because I knew it wasn't me, right? I wasn't there. But then the next question was, am I now also allowed to take the responsibility and drive the change? For example, you told me that process is bad. I ask you, what would be a better process? And as RT, we heard 1,000 of these guys come over and they always promised something and that they didn't deliver. And I said, you know what? Yeah, but I didn't come. It's the first time I come. So bear with me. And they said something. But then if I do it, will they then implement it? Because the change is actually the hard part. For me to decide, let's go that way, that's actually the easiest part. For the organizations out there to then follow that change, even if they actually requested it, that's actually the big effort. So in the beginning, yes, a central approach is a very effective way to do things. And what do we see then? Then we see that you want to have the best of worlds in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, right? Most bang for the buck. There are no synergies between, let's say, one continent to the others. So that's why you have maybe regional hubs, right? So yes, there's a central part where certain standards are rolled out, but at the same time, there's regional flavor to it, right? And then that's actually pretty cool. Yeah? So you have a little bit, or you lose a little bit of effectiveness, like my way or the highway. But at the same time, you have also, the regional flavors, and it's a little bit more efficient, right? Because you don't implement stuff you don't need. Yeah, that's the hope, at least. But what I see is that if you can go to the next stage, and that is something in a positive way, I call something like a distributed, like a network, like a mesh of excellence, like in a mesh architecture. If one node falls away, the whole network does not fall. And this is basically what we really wanted to do. And we also approached internally something like a carry the flag, a little bit like the Olympic Games. What do we mean by that? What do you mean by that is that we had one country taking the lead for one specific topic for the entire world. And it didn't have to be the big, big countries. It could have been also one of the quotes unquote smaller countries. So this way we created also the trust, because before we came in, it was always quotes unquote the big three, the big four countries running the show. Because statistically speaking, they are 80%, 90% of all the business volume anyhow. And
Yeah.
we really wanted to make it quotes unquote not fairer, but we wanted to give an impression of fairness.
But that is typical. I've seen that before. I worked on a project like 2015-ish when I was with that little accounting firm, and we were thinking about revamping our internal audit product. And the idea was to grow the pond and then have a disproportionate share of it, right? Versus just stealing away something from the PwCs and Deloittes and whatever. And the funny thing is, based on the org structure, it was exactly the same thing. Oh yeah, if Germany, the UK, and the US do it, it'll be good enough for us, right? What they didn't realize is the US had about 3,500 internal auditors. The Netherlands had about 30. So that the needs for the Netherlands were quite different than whatever we had in the US. You didn't need the staffing and all that other stuff in there. You needed some, how do I plan my internal audits? How do I track it and all that stuff? That was the core. But there was a lot of quote unquote overload that was pushed to the smaller companies. So the question is more, well, how do you measure success of your COE? How do you measure success of an initiative like that you bring in? So let me ask you that question, T. How do you measure success?
Yes. Two answers. One the meta, one the specific. Yeah. The meta answer is, and by the way, I learned this from Coach Bennett of Nike Run Club. I really do love running as well. In order to be consistently and continuously successful, you need to be able to measure success in as many ways as possible. So if you hold it in one number, in one KPI, you're destined to fail. Why? Because if you do 10 great things, but not the one thing, then everyone is talking about failure. So success in as many ways as possible, meaning what was the automation rate before now? At the same time, how many less manual interventions do we have? At the same time, what about the cycle time? Next one is, did we implement that ABAP we wanted to implement? Yeah. So yes, some black and white topics, some quantifiable, but also quality related issues, like we did
Yeah.
NPS. How happy are you to go home earlier, not having to press the red button 50,000 times a day, right?
Yeah.
So that is the meta answer. And in specific, we actually created a new KPI because we saw that in its simplicity, a lot of positive side effects were there, which we never had to mention. So it was called the digital fit rate. And the digital fit rate was basically just a KPI which measured the number of manual intervention arithmetically over the number of sales order items. So to speak, if you have 100 sales order items and you touch one through the entire process change, then you get a mark of 1.0. So less is better. Yeah, less touches is better. But the funny thing was, when we saw how the KPI improved, the countries themselves were talking about harmonization, standardization, and cleanup of master data. I didn't have to preach it. I was very ready to preach it. Hey guys, um, now let's talk about this monster. I didn't need to.
Yeah.
Why? Because they believed in that KPI. They saw the benefits, and for the first time, it was so transparent that we even, which was also a new thing, all the change requests we had were always open to every country in the world, and also their targets were also open to everyone. So we had open reporting, open targets, and open change requests. And the mantra, which I was actually also able to keep on, was if two countries want something, it automatically by default is a global change request and will be done. It's only two countries, not the majority, not business cases, blah, blah, blah. No. If two countries want it, consider it done. And the reason was, once I did this 2, 3 times, you can imagine that everyone was very careful in requesting things because they knew they would be messing it up for a lot of other countries if they had these specific.
Yeah, or they worked in the background and try to find allies, to say, hey, don't you think this is a good
Absolutely.
idea? Yes, yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, I was in the dark side before. I knew how to do my tricks in terms of, cost center consolidation, SLAs, transfer price issues. So I pulled all the effort into the headquarters and then pushed them back. So to speak, they got it for free because I pulled everything into the headquarters. Yeah. And therefore, they didn't need to budget. They didn't need to do all the politic. If it's necessary to be done, if it supports our shared KPIs, we will do it. And suddenly that center of excellence became a community for everyone. And I think that is really kind of a key message I wanted to say. We just created a community and we helped other people, a lot of people, we didn't even know who they are in different divisions of Siemens. Yeah, whether it's mobility, whether it's energy. Yeah, I was in digital industry. I was in manufacturing, concrete, discrete manufacturing. Yeah, but also solution business, system business, we help them as well. Why? Because we really believed in that community.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like there's both an organization component of it and a big communication component of it. You spent time investing in shaping the message, investing in your end consumers so that you could build a community that felt like they were close to the message rather than somebody who was being
Hmm.
told at the end of the line, hey, this is what that thou shalt do. And that ownership, sharing that ownership, that transparency, I've seen over and over again companies fail to achieve that. And then regardless of what they try to create, they don't get the buy-in from all the people who need to staff it, who need to listen to it, and ultimately who need to execute on the collective plans. I love it. And I think our audience will agree with us over our many episodes together. You've heard us talk about how communication is so important. It seems like, this was a cornerstone of how you approach some of what you did. But before we go on and talk a little more, we're going to leave you with a small break to think about these amazing lessons so far and think about your experiences. Have you been involved in a COE effort? What are your experiences with that? Have they been positive or negative? What has it contributed to you? Was it helpful? Or was your COE just another governance organization? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our second section, the how.
And welcome back. So this is an awesome, interesting conversation with T about centers of excellence. So I enjoyed a lot, and I think JM and I hope T will see it the same way. But T, let's go back to the topic. We spoke about, well, what is a COE? And I loved your three big lies analogy because I've seen that too. But what is the role that you see for COEs? You shared your personal experience on it, but what is the more generic role of a COE that you see maybe elsewhere, established by clients that you work with, or so all the guys were you not were the leader?
I think the common theme is scale and speed. So, because the assumption that we are talking about a specific set of expertise and skills is kind of a given. So, when I look at clients, they really want to make sure that they have the confidence to drive things on a global level, on a cross regional level, at scale and at speed. So, basically, it would be faster than without. But often that is also the beginning of the end, or that's also part of the problem, is that often when you look at top-down approaches, we are thinking that, quotes unquote, the frontline worker doesn't want it better. We talk a lot about reasons why things don't go that way because of resistance to change. And I don't believe in that, or I believe in it in a different way. I love resistance to change because these people still care. I hate when I see people who are indifferent and says, yes, sir, yes, boss, whatever you want. Resistance to change means people who have the courage to speak up, although I have the authority. I love that.
Well, it's like press, right? There's no bad publicity because at least people are paying attention to this and that they're focused in on the message you're sending out. You can shape opinion, but having no opinion, you've already lost. I love it. So now we've got people's attention. You got a captive audience, let's say. People are giving us feedback, negative or positive, fine. How do we get started with assembling, let's say, the structure, the head count, the mission or purpose you talked about before of a COE? How do I match that with my organizational needs, with the organizational realities of the people I have, and with the goals that we're aligning to strategic directions?
Absolutely. And it really depends on the situation, but you can still make it very transparent. Ask the executives who want to drive, for example, an initiative, is it an enabler? Is it an incubator? Is it the last line of defense? Do we have teeth in terms of governance, or we don't? Are we just basically the pool, the buffer to listen to all of the noise, the signals from out there? And then you can work with that. And obviously, it's not set in stone. And maybe just to do a little bit of a shameless plug of my own episode I did on COE a couple of months ago, what I've noticed is that the most successful COEs, whether in my own experience or with my clients, they actually never asked what is the best setup. They just started and then they adjusted as needed. And they knew on how to maneuver the best way between top-down governance, expectations, and bottom-up realities. So yes, they were the middle ground where the magic happens. So this is something which, with one of these companies, we did also a white paper, was really the essence. The essence is, in order to have a successful COE, you need to have the top-down context: resources, money, trust, and time. Don't talk to me about tool. Get out of here. You talk about tool, get out of the room. Thank you for the money, but you are not here to decide tools. Bottom up is content. Bottom up is which tool and how we're going to do it. And they always deliver in less time and less resources if you actually let them. And that's, by the way, the same thing. In the first year, we did not give any country targets. We asked the countries, what target would you give yourself? And I will not question it. And we did it. Why? Because there were some countries who wanted it easy, and then they're out. because they basically got shitstormed by themselves. The other countries looked at them and said, hey, everyone is transparent. Why are you free floating? They created so much anxiety, they were basically socially cancelled. But every country, that's the beauty of it, the punchline now, every country had own targets which were higher, more challenging than the ones I would have given, and they still overachieved them because they actually felt for the first time there is an actual trust. And the COE, my team was there to support them achieving that. So it was really a win-win. Yeah, so that is basically how we were fueling from a quotes unquote cost center point of view, how to do that. But now here comes the next topic. How can you be excellent if you don't have a DevOps kind of mentality, if you don't know what's actually out in the front line? So all my team, I said very clearly, you have to move and develop. You can stay in this umbrella of a COE, but you cannot do the same topics more than 3 years. Yeah. And most of them actually have chosen to develop. And I brought in other colleagues from the regions who saw our project becoming then a established cost center, so to speak. And we had a natural rotation of 100%, which was good because that's basically how we actually wanted. If we were truly honest to ourselves. And that is basically what I sometimes call the gold hamster dilemma. I don't know if you ever had a gold hamster or for your own children.
No.
It's a little bit of a sad investment because they honestly just do live 2 to 3 years. But 2 to 3 years is
Right.
actually a emotional investment still. So would you get a
Yeah.
gold hamster and then still after 2, 3 years, because that's a natural way, right? And I think this is the same thing about the COE. If you look at it as a cost center, you have to accept after 2, 3 years the party is over. You have to create a new party.
Are you saying that COEs should intentionally aim to dissolve themselves within a certain time frame?
Yes, in the way they're created, absolutely. But they can reinvent themselves and they can reshift their focus.
So what is next then? So if the first one is okay, to your example, let's make this process better. We end up and we achieve the goals that we've set ourselves. Isn't it mission accomplished? What is the next level? And I'm thinking about the double S curve. That
Right.
you have in organizations. So how do you help COEs that are on top of their game, that have established their mission? How do you help them finding the next big thing? Or do you just say, oh, go play hamster and play dead and go away?
No. But let's say, let's stick to our digital fit rate. So semantically, we could actually think that everything is totally 100% automated and there's no touch. But we actually understood there is a certain threshold. Yeah. It happened, by the way, at around 0.3, meaning 70 go through. In 30 cases, there at least will be one touch. Yeah. And we saw, yeah, there was a certain threshold. But we did not say we must make it 0.2. Some countries, by the way, did. But overall, we said, no, let's actually focus on other things. Now that we have this level of automation, let's have a reduction of cycle times. Let's have a higher reliability rates, less non-conformance, things like that. Yeah? So there's other ventures you can do, but they need to be confirmed and communicated, because otherwise you're holding to the old grails, so to speak. Yeah. So that's why the COE
Right.
is actually defined by not the new people, but also by new targets and by new, let's call them business narratives. Yeah. And for us, it was process mining in the beginning. Then we went to RPA. Then we went to low code, no code. And we even within low code, no code, we ventured into two areas, where is one, the citizen developer, and the other one is, let's say, the rapid
IT,
development. Yeah,
central,
IT.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So we always had things.
So here's my question then. If you're looking at an environment where you are constantly sort of swapping out what a COE is, and I'm not saying constantly in the sense that you're looking at this in a very short amount of time. I'm saying like it is just an organizational cycle in the long tail of an organization. The question is, how do you ensure that the lessons learned from COE 1 stick when it dissolves and COE 2 comes up? I'll give you the example you brought up, the digital fit rate.
Mm.
If that KPI was being maintained or at least pushed out or communicated or evangelized by a COE, and then that COE dissolves and you move on to the next thing, now you're moving into RPA, you're moving into low code, no code. What is there? What have you established to ensure that that digital fit rate remains a standard for the enterprise? Or conversely, is it no longer necessary for the enterprise to track that and when the COE goes away because you've determined that that was a part of an improvement initiative that has achieved its goals? How do you see that?
Well, on a punny level, just to oversimplify, it's like horoscope, right? I don't believe in horoscope, but if it's good, I take it. If it's bad, I don't believe in it anyway. So the digital fit rate must serve also the purpose to the overlords that they feel that there's a value. The people who really drive that, they see value in it, but they also come to the conclusion, let's keep it that way. That's enough. Maybe we should look at something else. But what you mentioned in terms of how to make change stick, which is, by the way, the hardest part. It's always easy to come in with
Oh,
the
yeah.
stick and then come in with the carrot and then both, but how to make the change really sticky is the hardest part. And, I'm very much interested in this concept by Johnson and Scholes from the early 90s. It's called the cultural web. And you have these 6 aspects, and I'm not going to go into all the little details. But basically, the long story short is, there are 6 aspects of stories, symbols, power structures, organization structures, control systems, and rituals. And you have to address them all. That's the unfortunate story. So if you want the simple answer, it's not 1, 2, 3, or 4 out of the 6 topics, it's all of them. And then you have this paradigm shift. And then T can go, he becomes a myth. Do you remember the times this guy, he implemented that digital fit rate based on this? And I'm long gone. The number is there. The definition, by the way, is still the same. I checked a couple months ago with some of my colleagues, but it's true. All of the people but one have left. And I cannot ask that one to hold on to the rituals of my past when I did daily stand-ups, for example. No, they will create new rituals. So that's why we need to address all of these aspects. And as stupid as it sounds, but if you have many ways to measure success, if you have infinite game kind of mindset, where it is not so concrete, then it is easier. It's not easy, but it's easier than not. And at the moment,
Right.
one of the strongest, quotes unquote, risks of everything crumbling again is the massive change Siemens organizationally wise have actually done. One huge company, now 3 separately listed companies on our German Dow Jones, the DAX. 3 listed companies.
Yeah.
So if the shareholders of Siemens Energy don't care about the digital fit rate, which was a conglomerate synergy thing, they won't do it. But I hope that
Right.
the people would still have value and then would continue it, even in their own flavor, in their own color, whatever that might be. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the organization's memory though is fairly short, even though it's a long running organization. And I say that because I've seen a lot of companies have KPIs like a digital
Mm,
fit rate that are specific to them. And I asked them, why are you tracking this? And the answer, the danger answer, is because we've always done.
correct.
Okay. Well, what value does it provide? Well, the answer back again is somebody some time ago thought this was important. So I guess we have to keep doing it.
Mm,
And really, the question that I have is when you have, let's say, 100% turnover, we're looking at like generations of people, like you would think of generations of humans. How do you make sure that somebody can tell your story? Because if you think that that KPI or that approach that the COE took was relevant and may continue to be relevant, how do you continue to equip each new generation of people as you swap them
mm.
out with that same story or the power to change the story in small ways, to update it for today, but still feel ownership of that? What do you say to them? What do you give to them to equip them with that capability?
Let's address the simpler part first. Simple doesn't mean easier, it's just simpler. small changes to reinforce the foundation. I think that's important. The continuous small stuff, not always the big revolutionary innovative stuff. Yeah, reinforcing continuously. I think that's important. But I think the more important part, which in my own words is, why would I have the audacity to actually think I need to keep my story alive? Because when people
Oh,
when people see value in whoever had that story, then it is really that mindset. So that mindset of openness, of trust, of transparency, I want that to be kept. But they don't need T to do that. But they had certain
right.
examples on how T did that. And yes, technology makes it easier in terms of videos or whatever. Back in the days, it was a PDF, boring. No one reads it. Maybe we have now videos. Makes it a little bit easier on that part. But more importantly is people will create their own stories, maybe along the same ways on how I kept my story or our shared stories alive. And that again, openness, trust, the transparency, the absolute empathy, but even more important, compassion to the problems. Because as I mentioned, nobody wants to have a really bad process. Nobody wants anybody else to have a bad process. And I think that's a beautiful thing about it, because today it was, I don't know what is it today. Today it's a generative AI, right? If I talk to people, they don't even know what I mean by convolutional neural networks. That's also AI. Oh no, it's all LLM now. Okay, LLM. Thank you. In 2 years, it's going to be something else again, right? But the thing about technology serving us to make our lives better will take different aspects. Yeah? So again, I think the personification is a very, very dangerous thing. We should do it in the beginning to be the conduit and the trash collector. Yes, please personify for that. And by the way, I get this shitstorm all the time. People think like, oh, T, you're putting yourself out there, humble brag a little bit too much, right? I says, no. I'm just telling the stories of other people who are, let's say, a little bit more introverted, and I'm just telling the stories on their behalf. I don't need impressions. I don't need nothing. Yeah. But the thing is, it's also my job, because I have no problem in performing and putting myself, my face, my name out there. That's why I'm telling that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But now you stole my thunder because I wanted to weave in the word humble brag at some point in time in this, and now you already said it. Dang. But having said that, I really like what you told us. The one question that I have is, we were always talking about that one COE. We have that one process that we supported. So the question that lingers in my mind is, what is next? Is it a one-time thing because only one lucky organization can have the T coming in and doing his magic? Or should an organization have X COEs, maybe aligned by end-to-end process that they have, because that's a more or less limited number. And then I come up with customers who said, no, we're going to do APQC, and then we bring everything in, and then we manage our processes, and are not able to say what managing your processes mean. So what is your advice for organizations who just get started with BPM in general and COEs, and they have the good intentions to have everyone in their organization?
Let me actually share with you on paper, which should have been a failed cause, which should have been a bad COE, but I think it was the greatest ever. It was centered around technology, okay, around a set of tools, but the idea was beautiful. So this guy, he looked what we have done. He did his own thing with his own team. It's beautiful. So he called it the shed on the farm. So he bought all the tools there are, all the licenses, no business case. And the only thing is that people from any cost center would come and say, hey, you got a lot of RPA bots. Can I use them? Exactly. It's for you to take and to use. The shed on the farm.
Yeah, I see chaos coming.
And then they, and they really, yeah, and they took all the RAFDB and the the RPAs, the low code, no codes, all these things he basically sourced with his team, and they created this community. And then they became, as you mentioned, a COE for many, many different processes they didn't even have on the radar. So the first problem that they actually had was they looked up the org code. Where is this person in the organization? And they thought, oh, that must be purchasing. I'm from sales. I can't use that. And no, it's for everyone, right? So they had to kick him then basically to the CFO in some chief of staff so that he could be really, really cross-functional, not for him personally, but for the other organization, because that was so radical to them. Yeah. And along, I never heard any question related to business case, what's a blah, blah, blah. And the reason was why? Because it was self-financed. It was utilizing a trick I have implemented. I'm also a certified Scrum Master. I always do business cases which have the return in sprints within the fiscal year. Because no CFO will say no to you if you actually get a return on investment maximum 1 year plus 1 day. So
Yeah.
that's why it's always there in the current budget, and then it's fine. You just shift it around and you can't spend the other stuff. No, don't worry, I will anyway self-finance myself, right? So this is basically what the shed on the farm basically did. And they had basically in the first month already years of savings, so they could actually like free float whichever way they wanted. But on paper, it shouldn't have existed. No concrete why, no org structure, no governance model, no nothing. But they just over delivered by value. And who is there to say, stop that, right? So when you ask me again, what's next? I think what's next is always in the eye of the beholder of what that organization needs. And sometimes, by the way, it might also be a tyrannical dictatorship because something happened externally, geographically, and there is no room for quotes unquote agile stuff. No, let's do fire and brimstone. Sometimes necessary. And I've done it, by the way, myself. When I came to Vietnam during COVID, also needed to follow things. It's people's lives, right? So it really does depend. Sorry.
Well, I think that this is a really good point for us to cap off the conversation. I love this idea of trying to build something that, you know, maybe it shouldn't have existed, but it provided such value, and it brought together people from across the business to share best practices with each other and also the whole organization. This is a legacy that you create, even if that legacy is very short, because the long tail of that legacy is organizational improvement. And the value you create in a single fiscal can scale up to a huge amount of value over a lifetime of organizational growth. That's amazing. And I want to turn it back to our audience as we close out this section and leave you with another question, specifically about your experiences and what you'd like to see in the future. So, talk about and think about what you would like to see from COEs that you interact with, or maybe COEs that you help create, or value that you can create for the organization. What would you advise your organization to build? How would you see your role in it, or at least how would you see yourself consuming content from it or working with it? And how can you and your team work together to make a better organization, a better outcome, powered by centers of excellence? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our final thoughts and a conclusion to the episode.
Hey, happy day, yeah. I need your love, won't let you down. Love won't let you down, won't let you down. Yeah, hey, happy day, yeah. I need your love, won't let you down. Hey, happy day, I need your love, won't let you down.
And welcome back. This is a very interesting and awesome conversation, T. So thanks for being on the show for this. But before we obviously ask you the most important questions of the world, let me do a little summary of what we spoke about. So we spoke about what a CEO is and why you should have one or shouldn't have one. And I really loved your 3 big lies analogy for it. So I will take that in my little tool chest for the next conversation that I have around it. And we spoke about the forms of a CoE, hub and spoke, and how it evolves into something different, hopefully an interconnected network. Then we also spoke about obviously top-down versus bottom-up approaches of establishing those and where the middle ground is, but also what are the next steps going forward. Your mission accomplished it, and then also another thing that I will take over is your golden hamster dilemma. It should just exist for 2 to 3 years, so that you're emotional invested in it. And now, obviously, the question that's on everybody's mind is, where can I reach out to this very interesting person? And where can I obviously learn more about his Tea with Tea series that he mentioned, shamelessly humble bragging as part of the show?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you will put on all the links there.
Absolutely.
And really, my offer is to everyone, just ping me. I might not always respond immediately, but I will always respond.
Well, that's a good conclusion for the episode. He's not always going to respond immediately, but he will always respond to you. And feel free to hit him up. I think you can get flooded with a bunch of messages from people who are like, I don't know what to do. Help me now. Well, you know what? He's got a lot of great advice. And also watch Tea with Tea because it contains a lot of the information sort of asynchronously. You don't necessarily have to reach him immediately to get that kind of good content. But speaking of good content, you can find all the links to Tea with Tea, as well as all the notes from the show and everything you might need on whatsyourbaseline.com. That's right. If you've liked what you've heard today, please go to whatsyourbaseline.com specifically for this episode /episode 56. And you're going to find lots of great information there, lots of good writing from Roland and some thoughts from me on whatsyourbaseline.com. And of course, you can follow us or like or share or all of the good social things that we love when you do, and give feedback. If you have feedback, you can email us at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com or leave some comments on LinkedIn. We love responding to those live. Well, I've had a really good time. Roland, this has been really fun. T, you've been fantastic. And I'm excited to find out more about all these things by watching more of Tea with T. But until I've finished that whole archive of content, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
I am T.
And my name is Roland Wold.
And we will see all of you in the next one.